My revenge is spread out over centuries, and it's only just begun. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen, and this week we are taking a look back at the legendary Hammer Dracula franchise, and we're actually going to rank the franchise. So I'm really excited about this episode because I love this franchise. I think it's one of the most important and best horror franchises in cinema history. So there, we're going to talk about this bad boy right here. The legendary Count Dracula, as played by the great Christopher Lee. And of course you had Van Helsing portrayed by the late great Peter Cushing. So you had the two stalwarts of Hammer films. So many Hammer films you see either Christopher Lee or Peter Cushing or both in the same movie. But at any rate, they are amazing actors and just legendary in the annals of horror history. So let's get right to it, folks. In at number 9 on the list is The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. Yeah, the movie is kind of bizarre. It's a mix of horror and martial arts, so it's a really ridiculous aspect. But the movie is actually pretty damn entertaining. It's much better than it has any right to be. And part of that, of course, is you had Peter Cushing returning for one final time as Professor Van Helsing. So in this film, it's the only time you see Dracula portrayed by anyone but Christopher Lee. Here he's played by John Forbes Robertson. So he does a decent job, but it's hard to tell if his performance is that good because he's in it so little. You only see him at the beginning and at the very end. So what happens is this young shaman wants to bring about the rise of the legendary Seven Golden Vampires, and he enlists the help of Count Dracula. So Dracula decides to agree to this if he can inhabit the body of the young shaman. So he does, and that's what happens. He escapes the castle, and he goes about to conjure up the legendary Seven Golden Vampires, along with an army of the undead. A bunch of zombies come up from the ground to do the bidding of the Seven Golden Vampires. So it's really a lot of fun. You see all kinds of craziness, all these kung fu masters going at it with the vampires. It's funny. It's just crazy. It's ludicrous, but it's a lot of fun. So I'm gonna just say right now is I love all the entries in the Hammer Dracula franchise. So if you see some lower than others, just remember that I love all of them. So that's why the next one might be controversial to you folks. And that is Dracula, Prince of Darkness, which I got as part of this 3-feature disc. So yeah, a lot of people love Dracula, Prince of Darkness, and they see it as one of the best entries. And I do think it is a solid entry in the Hammer Dracula franchise. But the one thing that bothers me about it is that Count Dracula doesn't have any lines in the film. So you got Christopher Lee coming back in his second entry in the Hammer Dracula series, and he has no dialogue. And that just kind of bothers me because I love his performance so much in the horror of Dracula. I just love his portrayal of Dracula. I think it's second only by a hair to Bela Lugosi. He's just so intimidating and imposing, and to see him not have any dialogue kind of sucks for me. But there is one great scene where he's seducing a young woman to be his bride. He opens his shirt up and he cuts himself with his fingernail, and he calls upon the woman to suck the blood from his chest, and it's like a weird erotic kind of thing, but it's really cool scene. And it's another great scene where you see this guy hanging above the coffin of Dracula. This is the scene where he gets resurrected. And then this guy who's Dracula's servant cuts the guy's throat, and buckets of blood pour out. It's sick, it's nasty. And then you see Dracula slowly start to form. The flesh starts to come back, you know. It's just a really cool scene. It's a really cool effect too. So next up we have Dracula AD 1972, which I have as part of this 2-disc set, and 4 of the best films in the Hammer franchise. And so you got Dracula AD 1972. So what happened with Dracula AD 72? It saw the return of Peter Cushing as Lorimer Van Helsing. Now what they did with Dracula AD is they tried to bring Dracula into the modern age, because they were trying to compete with the American audiences, which they had a lot more realistic horror films going on, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Black Christmas and things like that, where Hammer was still kind of stuck in the Gothic ages, you know, and the period pieces. So they decided to bring Dracula into the modern age, which is 1972, but so the swinging London in the 70s is where Dracula comes into play. But I love the scene at the beginning where Dracula is battling Van Helsing on top of the stagecoach. It's really thrilling, and the stagecoach tumbles over and Dracula gets impaled by the wooden wheel. And of course Van Helsing drives it further into his heart, killing him. So what happens is a descendant of Dracula gets some of his blood, and what happens is later on in the modern day, one of that guy's descendants decides to conjure up Dracula by having this satanic ritual and performing a black mass in a church with these young group of hippies. And that's exactly what happens. And I love the scene where Dracula is finally resurrected, and this dude Johnny Alucard, yeah, love the name. And he's like, "Please, master, let me do some killing this time. Don't forget, I'm the one that resurrected you." And Dracula's just like, "It was my will." I love that. He gives him no credit at all. But at any rate, this movie is a lot of fun. You get lovely Hammer women like the beautiful Carolyn Monroe. You get Stephanie Beacham playing Van Helsing's granddaughter, Jessica Van Helsing. And another awesome portrayal by Peter Cushing as Van Helsing, just at his best, and I love seeing him battle wits with the legendary vampire Count Dracula. Okay, so next up, folks, is the Scars of Dracula. This one came out in 1970, the same year as Taste the Blood of Dracula. So why they kind of rushed it so quick, I'm not quite sure, because Taste the Blood was also excellent. But at any rate, I did enjoy this film very much. One of the best things I love about it is Dracula has so much dialogue in this film. He has a lot more to do than probably any of the entries in the Hammer Dracula franchise. And I love that. I eat it up because I absolutely love Christopher Lee as Dracula. And to see him have all kinds of dialogue and a lot more menacing. And I noticed he's awfully pasty white in this film. I don't know what was up with the makeup job there, but it seems like Dracula's unhealthy, like he hasn't fed in a while. He hasn't tasted blood, if you will. But I love his performance. The downside of this film is they show these vampire bats. They look really cheesy looking. You can almost see the wires hanging down. But it's a really bad effect, and the problem is you see them a lot in the movie. So it is the first time you see bats associated with Dracula too, which is kind of weird. And then the bats are there to serve Dracula. He controls them. But yeah, that's the downside. Otherwise, I love the film. It's just awesome. I love Christopher Lee's performance once again, and I love seeing all the dialogue he has. So next up is one you might find controversial again, guys, because this film gets a lot of hate, which I don't understand, and that is the Satanic Rites of Dracula. I find it to be one of the most fun entries in the entire franchise. A lot of people take issue with it because they, again, it's a sequel to Dracula AD 1972, so you have some returning cast members, and you also still have Dracula in the modern age. But this one, they inject a little bit of the spy thriller into it, which is kind of interesting, and I thought it was kind of neat and fun, but a lot of people don't like that. So Dracula here is undercover. He's pretending to be this corporate executive type. He has this conglomerate going on, and underneath the surface he has a satanic cult going on, which is led by these leaders of government, these government officials and these corporate executive types. So these are the people that are running the country, and they're involved in this cult. And what happens is Dracula has a real purpose this time. His quest is to bring about the Black Plague onto the world and basically kill everyone. So he really has a sense of purpose in this one. He doesn't even care about himself dying, because he's done with it. He just wants to end everything. And of course we got Van Helsing there to take him down once again. So I love them battling wits once again. I love seeing these two brilliant actors go at it, and it's just so much fun. The other downside is he kind of meets his demise quite easily, and it's kind of a little bit cheesy in a way, because the way he dies is from a bush of thorns. A thorn bush kills Count Dracula. And I guess it represents the crown of thorns that Jesus wore. So once again, that good versus evil aspect. I actually enjoy the scene. It's a lot of fun when seeing him run through the bushes and trying to grab at Peter Cushing. It's kind of ridiculous, but they make the best of it because they're such great actors. He does have one awesome line in the movie. He goes, "My revenge is spread out over centuries, and it's only just begun." And you see the fire behind him, there's castles burning up, and he just has that one last great line. I love it. So next up is Dracula has risen from the grave. Another entry that a lot of fans love. A lot of fans feel this is definitely one of the best entries in the franchise. And I definitely have to agree, because it's so well shot. It's so competently directed. It's got a great gothic feel, and all the characters are well fleshed out and well portrayed. And Christopher Lee is at his most menacing as Count Dracula, and this time he does have lines, because this was a direct sequel to Dracula Prince of Darkness. But it was nice to see him have some dialogue this time. He's more involved, he has more to do, and he's really sinister in this entry. Also, it's just an excellent film. I love the characters. You got the beautiful Veronica Carlson there, who is a staple of Hammer films. And I love that you got the Monsignor. You got a man of the cloth going at it with the ultimate evil in Count Dracula. So that classic good versus evil, that Captain Ahab versus Moby Dick type thing going on. And I love it. It's so well done. So next up, you have Taste the Blood of Dracula. This one right there, which I also have as part of this 4-pack. Once again, many people put this at the top of the list when it comes to Hammer Dracula films, because it's got a awesome dark atmosphere, probably the darkest atmosphere of any of the Hammer Dracula films. And it's also got one of the best plots. You got these three rich aristocrats that are real thrill seekers, and they're just looking for the next high and the next level of debauchery, you know. And so they're bored at this point, and what happens is they run into this guy, Lord Courtly, played by Ralph Bates, who's this real, you know, debonair, suave gentleman, who's got some real weird things going on. A lot of the townsfolk are scared by him, because he's involved in witchcraft and black magic, if you will. So what happens is he ends up getting Dracula's ring, Dracula's cape, and also some of his blood. And he decides he wants to use that in a black mass ritual. So it's a really creepy scene when you see them at this church, and he's got the altar laid out and this real satanic imagery going on. And so he sprinkles some of the blood, the dried up blood, into chalices and gives it to the three aristocrats. And you got all these evilness together, you know, all these people that are really into sick, demented stuff. So they feel that, along with the chalices filled with Dracula's blood, it will be enough to conjure up Dracula. And that's exactly what it does. So Dracula is brought back once again, and Christopher Lee is once again at his menacing best here. And just the characters in this film are really engaging, and I love the plot of it. And it's just really grabs you, you know. So, and this movie is just so much fun, and this one is also R-rated, which is one of the few R-rated movies in the Hammer Dracula franchise. So there's more nudity, more violence, you know, they want to compete again with the American audiences. So taste the blood of Dracula in at number 3. Next up, folks, is The Brides of Dracula, which I got as part of this excellent collection here. So The Brides of Dracula is an absolutely excellent made film. So it kind of pains me to put it this high on the list, but you just cannot deny the quality of the film Brides of Dracula. One of the things I hesitate is because it doesn't actually have Dracula in the film. It doesn't have Christopher Lee as the Count. It doesn't even have Dracula, even though the name of it is Brides of Dracula. But you just can't deny the quality of it. When I first saw it, I was like blown away. I'm like, wow, this movie is awesome. And it's because of the portrayal of Van Helsing by Peter Cushing, the talent of him as an actor, and everyone involved with the project is fantastic. You got the beautiful lead actress there who plays the young school teacher who comes to the town seeking just to be a school teacher, but she has nowhere to stay. So this woman who is the mother of the lead vampire in the film. So what happens is the young vampire in the film is tied up or chained up in his room, secluded by his mother, because she doesn't want him to go out into society and start killing off all the townsfolk. But at the same time, there is something sinister about her. So she sees this young lady in distress. She's got nowhere to go, no place to stay, and she kind of lures her in. She says, "Come and stay with me. We'll be more than happy to have you, and I'd love the companionship." And she just seems like a nice old lady that's looking for companionship. She's got nothing to do. She doesn't talk to anybody. So that's a really interesting aspect of it. So they bring her to this beautiful castle, and it's just such a gothic castle, and it's amazing. The set pieces, the set design in this film are amazing. And the young vampire is very charismatic. He's very charming and handsome, and he seduces this young woman to do his bidding and to unlock his chain so he get out there and do some evil deeds once again, and get out into society and feed on the blood of young women. And he does just that. He gets several brides together to do his evil deeds. So Brides of Dracula, folks, it's such a well-made movie, and I love some of the chase scenes, and these are the best chase scenes in the entire franchise. I think it's just thrilling when the young vampire does battle with Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. It's so intense, it's so great, I love it. So of course at number 1, folks, it's a no-brainer, and of course it just has to be The Horror of Dracula. It has to be. Some people actually put The Brides of Dracula at number 1, which surprises me. But no, I'm going with Horror of Dracula, because to me it's the greatest vampire film ever made. It's the greatest Hammer film, it's the greatest Dracula film, and it's the greatest vampire film ever made. It's just so awesome in every way. I love Christopher Lee as the Count. He's such an imposing, intimidating figure. He's so tall, he's got the real deep voice, and he's got that gentlemanly persona, you know. He's very well-mannered, well-spoken, and highly intelligent, and he just makes an awesome Dracula, and he's so great the way he seduces people with his stare, and he's got the bloodshot eyes, and it's just an awesome performance. It just really grabs you and captivates you. You can't take your eye off the screen whenever Christopher Lee is on that screen. And the same thing goes for Peter Cushing as the brilliant Van Helsing. And he's the best version of Van Helsing ever, in my opinion. The best performance of Van Helsing in the history of vampire films, in the history of film. And this is just absolutely a thrilling movie. The score is excellent. Every performance is excellent. It's got such a great gothic feel and flavor and atmosphere. It's just terrifying, and it's just brilliant in its portrayal and its execution. Top of the line stuff here. So number one is the horror of Dracula, folks. If you want to hear a little bit more of my thoughts on the horror of Dracula, check out my review on horror of Dracula. So Horror of Dracula at number one, folks. This was so much fun for me because I love this franchise. So you guys check out all of these films and buy them and watch them forever. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.